acidic enzymes that actually flush it out of their system, so the high only lasts about an hour, so I can get you up, and then I put you right back down before you leave. That's kind of what I like to do for my control meals, just to make sure that I have a safe environment. As far as large catering is concerned, sauces, all the way. I would have to say that sauces are the best way to do it. You want to make one infused, one non-infused. That is probably the easiest and most simple way to do that. And just the dosage aspect, it's a complex thing for our industry. Right now we're using auto-building app systems that allow us to send an app request where they fill out a quick questionnaire and we get a ballpark idea for each individual person, just like you would for a wedding. And there's a lot of wedding apps out there that do this for caterers, so you can actually build in all of your questionnaires for allergies and everything along those lines. So when I have a big sit-down, 12 chefs flying in from around the country that I mentor, I bring them in, and we are catering to a T. So it's 12 chefs. That means I can handle about 240 people to make sure that they're properly dosed.
So I want to let you all know I was asked like 3 minutes before this panel started if I would moderate, so I've not prepared actual questions. Is there a question from the audience at this time? Does anyone have a question? Yes.
So I hear you talking about 10 milligrams being like sort of like what most people can tolerate, but I have found in talking to some community members that it's actually far less than that, and that even 5 milligrams is enough to send someone into full-blown paranoia. So I love this idea of allowing people to have control over that experience. But, you know, I have a feeling that we're biasing these meals toward people that are already comfortable with consuming cannabis in this way. And what it looks like, if that is true for, 10 milligrams is true for this population, how do we entice those other folks who could benefit from this type of experience with doses that may or may not be 10 milligrams?
Sure. If I could talk for a second about this, we were speaking yesterday, and I was thinking, well, why can't we just go to the Hilton and get a ballroom or something? Everybody stays there, right? Everybody spends the night there, no one drives home, does anything. And we give the audience, or they bring or themselves, I don't know what the laws are exactly around this, but teach people how to dose themselves and what they're comfortable with. So let's all start with 5 milligrams and let's wait half an hour and have some entertainment going on. And then let's take another 5 or whatever, and just kind of, and how are you feeling? Are you feeling like you're done for the evening? Go upstairs and have a good time with your partner. Or whatever, but teaching people how to dose themselves properly. And thank you for bringing that up, because I think we all are kind of on the 10 milligram thing, because that's kind of what the law allows, or that's kind of how Washington State Liquor Control Board is trying to define it as what's acceptable or okay for someone to take without them going into their trip. Everybody has their story where they accidentally took too much edibles. I hear them all the time. I'm sure you all do too. And so it's education, right? Education and advocacy.
That's exactly what I would say. Education. There's a lot more information out there about cannabis than there ever has been before. There's a lot more interest. There's a lot more curiosity, and the education needs to be there. People sometimes there's still so much stigma around it. People are afraid to ask their questions, but they want to know. People are going into the stores. They have no idea what they're looking at. There needs to be more education across the board.
You have a question there?
No,
Sorry, sir.
Oh,
okay.
I definitely want to figure out a way to do that in my restaurant. I'm just not allowed to. That I don't have a way that I can have like a cooking class and show someone, here's how you make this. I can't even start there. I have to do it off the grid. I either have them over to my house and kind of start that process, but I'm still kind of in a gray area, because if the Liquor Control Board finds out about it, they can strip all my license in 2 seconds. And that's what makes it really hard. It's really restrictive to even start having a conversation with somebody in a restaurant going, hey, what do you want to do? How are you? Is this your first time? I legally not even allowed to do that. And that's really hard, because I can talk to somebody and say, hey, listen, I have a regular that comes in. They like 2 Jack Daniels over a 45-minute period. This person over here likes a rosé. They can drink a half a bottle within an hour and a half. and I start to learn all these differences between them. But on this front, there's nothing I can do, without having to do it at the risk of losing all my stuff. And that's really terrible.
As far as catering for me is concerned, we have, and there's photos available online, we have very large Pelican cases that are filled with extraction-specific programming, because we actually, I'm an extractor as well. I do hydrocarbon work, I do cryogenic, I do some pretty crazy stuff. We found that we can custom tune the profiles of the extractions to not only make them burn out, but to make them, as I said, to do the mood factor. And what we've also learned is in large catering events that we have a rescue remedy system that's already created, and every single one of our staffs and formulary personnel, there's actually a young lady in the audience right now who's one of my formularies. She's quite amazing. She actually carries a rescue remedy. So when somebody does have what we would, in the industry as a slang term, call it a freak out, or their endocannabinoid system has been launched into high gear, I strongly suggest the 2.5 milligram right off the bat. The lower the dose to get them started, the better, because it kind of ramps them up. I don't ever suggest somebody, hey, it's the first time I've ever done edibles, or the first time I've ever smoked or anything, go and take a 30 milligram meal or even a 10 milligram meal in a random setting over a glass of wine. But as technology continues to improve and education gets out there and we continue to educate people, they're going to find that there are ways to stop the cannabis high. And that's what we do. We stop the cannabis high through a combination of extracted materials within secondary terpene profiles, as well as niacin and CBD. So we actually, here you go, 20 minutes later or less based on bioavailability, and they're done. Their high is gone. A lot of people, based on their weight, I can have it gone in 10 or 15 minutes. And I'm actually working on an inhaler version right now of that, so that I can just get people to take a puff of it, and I'm about this close. So it's out there, it's coming.
So kind of like Narcan for cannabis.
Exactly, that's exactly what it is. It's Narcan for cannabis.
I think transparency, testing, labeling, knowing what you're getting into, and I think, as everybody's been talking about the 10, it's important that you know that the 10 is 10 and not 10 as 20. And I think as you're transparent with what's in there and what's tested and everybody knows, then getting to that dose for yourself makes sense, because if somebody's, double what they're saying it is, you're not helping people. So I think getting to a base and a reference is, as Eric was saying, we know a shot of Jack Daniels, what that is and what that does for a person. I think individually, how much somebody weighs or what their tolerances are, we can't know that right off the bat. You're depending on the person being self-responsible in that way, but we should be able to say that, 1 milligram is 1 milligram. So I think getting into that kind of transparency and labeling is important to this process.
I also think it's really important to know if you're using cannabis, which cannabis you're using, if you're using sativa, indica, and what the terpene profiles are, because that's going to change your high, and it's going to impact you. Are you going to go to sleep, or are you going to be up and go out and disco for the rest of the night? So there's another question out here. Thank you.
My question is alcohol and cannabis. So my questions are, should we allow people to have those choices, adults have those choices in the same place, like a bar or other recreation? Should we allow them to be in the same products together, alcohol and cannabis, drinks or food? And finally, should we let the same agency be in charge of both?
Great question. Who wants to go first? Go, Jeremy.
I'm a little bit of a conservative when it comes to cannabis. I'm definitely medically oriented more than anything else. Yeah, my recreational aspects are definitely in the culinary world. I would say no. I don't think that alcohol and cannabis should be in there together because some people have bad reactions with it. Some people, especially on the early end of things, can completely change that factor. Yet, I would say that I'd be lying to you and say that I don't do that. I do make occasional cocktails with cannabis, and I think they're amazing and they're delicious. And they give you an amazing high, but until there's an appropriate regulation to make sure that that is squared away and right, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it at all. As far as I'm assuming we're talking about like Liquor Control Board, one agency handling alcohol, and one agency handling cannabis. Well, first and foremost, I was in the alcohol industry for years as the drunken chef, represented Jack Daniels, Evan Williams, and a numerous amount of tequila companies, and even got a huge launch here. And the fact of the matter is no, they don't belong. Because the alcohol industries and all these people managing alcohol don't know what the hell they're doing. They don't understand it. And if you're gonna do anything, go to the beer companies, because at least they have a close enough genetics to hops that they might actually understand some of the basics, but that's even scratching the surface. To be honest with you, I don't think any of these agencies know what they're doing for the most part. And when they're finally bringing people on